This is what's left of the South Fork Dam, a 900-foot gap between two wooded hills, 14 miles up a Pennsylvania valley from a city called Johnstown. It was built to feed a canal that railroads made obsolete within years. Rebuilt as a private lake for some of the richest men in Gilded Age America, Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick among them. It was modified in ways that made a failure almost inevitable. And on May 31st, 1889, it failed all at once. 20 million tons of water down a 14-mile valley in under an hour. 2,209 deaths. No one was ever held responsible. I'm Thomas. I'm a civil engineer, and this is the story of the Johnstown Flood. Johnstown sat where the Little Conemaugh and Stony Creek rivers meet, in a narrow valley in the Allegheny Mountains, about 60 miles east of Pittsburgh. By 1889, it was a steel town of roughly 30,000 people, built up around the Cambria Iron Company. People came for the mills. Cambria Iron drew workers from across the country and beyond, packed into a valley so narrow the hillsides ran straight down to the riverbanks, leaving barely any room for a town to spread, let alone for a river to spread when it rose. Flooding wasn't new here. The rivers had come up before, more than once, and the town had learned to live with a wet spring, move the furniture upstairs, wait it out. What Johnstown had never had to reckon with was a lake. 14 miles upstream was something almost nobody in town thought about. So why did the South Fork Dam fail? Not in one moment, in 5 decisions made over 50 years by people who weren't thinking about Johnstown at all. It started out sound. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania spent the better part of 15 years building it, finishing in 1852. 72 feet high, roughly 900 feet across, a base 220 feet thick, at the time the largest earthen dam in the country. It backed up Lake Conemaugh, nearly 2 miles long, holding back on the order of 20 million tons of water. Its only job was feeding a canal during dry months. Then, the job disappeared. Railroads made the canal obsolete within a few years of the dam's completion. The state walked away from it. It passed through private owners who did little to maintain it. And in 1862, neglected and leaking, it partially gave way and drained out on its own. No one downstream was hurt. Johnstown had already seen a version of this once and gotten lucky. Then it was rebuilt, badly. In 1879, a Pittsburgh speculator named Benjamin Ruff bought the abandoned dam and lake bed with a group of partners. 2 years later, they'd rebuilt it and opened it as the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, a private mountain retreat that would eventually count 61 members, including Carnegie, Frick, Andrew Mellon, and Philander Knox. Ruff had no engineering background and barely involved anyone who did. One contemporary account states flatly that no engineer of any experience level was ever consulted during the entire reconstruction. And then it was modified, 3 ways that would matter more than any other on May 31st, 1889. The crest was lowered by 2 or 3 feet to widen a carriage road across the top, shaving away exactly the margin meant to keep the lake from reaching the top of the embankment. The 5 cast iron discharge pipes that had once let engineers draw the lake down in an emergency were never replaced after a previous owner sold them for scrap. The club could fill the lake, but it had no way to empty it in a hurry, and a metal screen went up across the spillway to keep the club's stocked bass from swimming downstream. It worked on the fish. It also caught every branch and log the creek carried, guaranteeing that the dam's one working outlet would be the first thing to choke. None of this was a secret. Daniel Morrell ran the Cambria Iron Company, Johnstown's largest employer, and he remembered 1862. In 1880, worried about the club's rebuild, he sent his own engineer, John Fulton, to inspect it. Fulton's report found the reconstruction inadequate. Morrell wrote to Ruff that a dam built this way would be a permanent danger to everyone in the valley below it, and offered to help pay for real repairs. Ruff wrote back that there was nothing to worry about. "You and your people are in no danger from our enterprise." He never took Morrell up on the offer. Morrell died in 1885, 4 years before the flood, having never gotten the club to fix what his own engineer had flagged. He wasn't the only warning either. The dam had leaked and worried people on and off since the 1860s, patched more than once with little more than mud and straw. By 1889, the valley had heard the dam is going to break so many times it had become a kind of local joke. When the real warning came, most people didn't believe that one either. May 31st, 1889 started the way a lot of bad days start, with rain that had already been falling for 2 days straight, one of the heaviest storms the region had ever recorded. At the lake, club president Elias Unger noticed the water had risen more than 2 feet overnight. He called in laborers. The club's young resident engineer, John Park, split the crew. Some tried to raise the crest with dirt and mud. Others tried to clear the branches and debris jammed against the spillway's fish screen. Both jobs were, in effect, already lost. The rain wasn't stopping. The spillway, even clear, had never been sized to pass a storm like this one. By early afternoon, the lake was still climbing faster than the crew could build. Park watched the water close in on the crest, and then it reached it. Before we go any further, I want to explain what's actually happening here, because it's a different failure than the one most people picture when they think dam disaster. A dam like Teton fails from the inside. Water finds a path through the foundation and quietly erodes a channel through the dam's own body before anyone outside can see it coming. This dam failed from the top down. It's called overtopping, and it's almost the opposite problem. This embankment was built to hold water back, not to have water flow over it. When the crest was lowered and the spillway couldn't pass the runoff fast enough, the lake just kept rising until it started pouring over the top like water over a curb. An earthen dam has no defense against that. The downstream face isn't armored for it. The moment water starts running down that slope instead of the spillway, it starts cutting a channel, exactly the way rain cuts a gully down a dirt road. That channel gets deeper, which lets more water through, which cuts it deeper still. It's a feedback loop, and once it starts, there's no crew fast enough to stop it by hand. By the time anyone at the lake understood what was happening, the dam had already lost. It just hadn't lost visibly yet. Now, back to May 31st, 2:45 p.m. Park rides a horse down to South Fork Village and gets a message onto the telegraph line. The dam is becoming dangerous and may possibly go. It's relayed on toward Johnstown and beyond. Most people who hear it do what they've done every other time in 20 years. Nothing. 3:10 p.m. The center of the dam gives way completely. In under an hour, Lake Conemaugh, roughly 20 million tons of water, starts emptying into the valley. Within minutes, the village of South Fork, almost directly below the dam, is hit first. From there, the wave doesn't spread out and lose power the way floods normally do on open ground. It's funneled between two mountain ranges, and for 14 miles it stays a wall, bouncing corner to corner down the valley, picking up houses, barns, rail cars, and animals as it goes. At the rail yards of East Conemaugh, an engineer named John Hess hears the roar before he sees anything. He throws his locomotive into reverse and ties the whistle open, riding backward through the yard, blowing a continuous alarm. It works. It sends people scrambling for high ground who'd have had no warning otherwise. It doesn't work for everyone. 50 people die at East Conemaugh, roughly half of them trapped aboard a passenger train, the Day Express, stalled on flooded track with nowhere to go. The wave keeps moving through Franklin and into Woodvale, where it tears through the Gautier wireworks and pulls miles of barbed wire into the current. Wire that will maim survivors downstream and, before the day is over, help feed a fire. 4:07 p.m., 57 minutes after the dam gave way, having traveled 14 miles, the flood reaches Johnstown. A wall of water and wreckage witnesses put at anywhere from 30 to 60 feet high, moving close to 40 miles an hour. It doesn't hit the city once. The wave slams into Westmont Hill on the far side of downtown, and the impact throws a violent backwash, rolling back through the streets from the opposite direction. A second wave colliding with the first. For about 10 minutes, most of downtown Johnstown is caught in that collision, crushed or drowned by water moving in more than one direction at once. The Hulbert House, the newest and finest hotel in town, took the wave almost directly. Of the roughly 60 guests inside when it hit, only about 10 got out alive. The building came apart nearly the instant the water reached it. One person in Johnstown had been fighting this flood since before it existed. Telegraph operator Hetty Ogle had been at her post at the Western Union office on Washington Street since 7:44 that morning, when she'd wired word that the river was already up 12 feet in 24 hours, before the dam had even broken. She spent the rest of the day relaying warnings up and down the line, even as the ordinary river flooding rose around her own building. Around 3 p.m., with the water already pulling down telegraph poles outside, she wired Pittsburgh that this would be her last message. She wasn't exaggerating. Within the hour, the wave from the dam tore her office from its foundation. Ogle, her daughter Minnie, and several others sheltering with her all died. Her body was never recovered. The only thing that survived her was a set of keys, found later in the debris near the stone bridge. They're still kept at the Johnstown Flood Museum today. Below the town, the Pennsylvania Railroad's stone bridge, 7 arches, built to carry trains across the Conemaugh, held. It was the first thing in 14 miles that did, but holding meant catching. Everything the flood had carried since the dam broke: houses, freight cars, animals, trees, miles of barbed wire from the wireworks, and an unknown number of people, some still alive, piled up against it until the debris field stood 30 to 40 feet high across roughly 30 acres. That night, the wreckage caught fire. It burned for 3 days. An estimated 80 people who had survived the flood itself died trapped in that fire, some of them tangled in the same wire the water had swept up miles before. For some victims, the flood didn't just come once, it took 2 tries. The official toll was 2,209. 99 entire families disappeared. Hundreds were never identified. The final victims weren't recovered until 1906. Help came fast and from far away. The newly formed American Red Cross sent its founder, Clara Barton, then 67 years old. She stayed in Johnstown for 5 months, running what's generally regarded as the Red Cross's first major domestic disaster relief operation, organizing shelter, food, and medical care for a population that had just lost 1 in 10 of its neighbors. The city rebuilt. It took years, but it rebuilt. And it built itself something new in the process. 2 years after the flood, the Cambria Iron Company finished a funicular railway up the hillside above downtown, the Johnstown Inclined Plane. It was designed from the start to double as an escape route to high ground, and it wasn't symbolic. In 1936, when the Conemaugh flooded again, it carried nearly 4,000 people to safety. It did the same thing again in 1977. This valley learned, the hard way, to build itself a way out. People here still call it Flood City, not as a wound they're hiding, but as a fact of who they are. Survivors and families of the dead sued the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club and its members. The club argued 2 things: that as an unincorporated association, it had no assets a judgment could reach, and that the flood was an act of God, unforeseeable, not a consequence of anyone's decisions. Courts agreed with the club every time. Not one member, not Carnegie, not Frick, not any of the 61 names on the roster, was ever found liable for a single death or a single dollar of damage. Some of the people who sued went bankrupt paying for it. A handful of members quietly donated to relief funds afterward, but nothing was compelled by a court, and nothing undid the verdicts. The club itself didn't outlast the outrage by much. It disbanded in 1904. Its clubhouse and grounds sold off at a sheriff's sale to satisfy a mortgage. I came into this one expecting an engineering story. A bad spillway, a lowered crest, a mechanism I could diagram in 15 minutes. That part's still true. It's the backbone of what you just heard. But the longer I sat with this valley's history, the more it turned into a story about what happens after the water recedes. Who gets remembered, who sues and loses anyway, and who ends up quietly building an escape route into a hillside because they've learned the people in charge won't always warn them in time. To much of the country in 1889, this case became a symbol of the Gilded Age itself. Some of the richest men in America modifying a dam for their own leisure, ignoring the engineer who told them what it would cost, then walking away from the deaths without paying a settlement. Legal historians still point to Johnstown as one of the cases that helped push American courts over the following decades toward holding landowners responsible for hazards they create on their own property, whether or not anyone can prove negligence. It came too late to help anyone in this story. Today, the National Park Service maintains the dam remnants as the Johnstown Flood National Memorial. The stone bridge still stands. It still carries trains. The Johnstown Flood Museum still keeps Hetty Ogle's keys, along with thousands of other objects pulled from the wreckage. And dam safety organizations around the country still mark May 31st every year.